He is Peter Kareiva, director of the world-famous Institute of the Environment and Sustainability at UCLA. Also known as IOES, the institute is comprised of hundreds of students, faculty, and researchers who partner with everyone from businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies to restaurants, national parks, and environmental advocacy organizations. The goal is to find a science solution to any sort of environmental issue. The Institute has 10 research centers studying everything related to sustainability. We met with Kareiva at UCLA to get a better understanding of how environmental issues are not just doom and gloom, an all-or-nothing equation where one side is right and the other side is wrong. What exactly is sustainability?
The way I think about sustainability is that no one, not one of us, wants to use the planet or use resources so that tomorrow we're worse off, next week we're worse off, next year, next century we're worse off. So it's this notion that let's not use up our future opportunity. And then economically, it's come increasingly to involve senses of fairness and equity. So that it's not a sustainable world if, you've made sure that there'll always be enough food. Yeah, you make sure that you'll have clean, fresh water, but 1% of the population has access to most of it, and the rest of the population is just barely getting by on those resources. So it's this very scientific idea that deals with ecology and the natural sciences and the physical sciences. It's this quality of life idea, and then there's an economic notion in terms of distribution of resources. Sustainability is how we live upon the planet. Certainly, how we act as consumers, certainly what businesses do, government policy, but it's just the way we live on the planet.
We often hear the term staunch environmentalists or environmentalists. Where was this born out of? When did this really all begin? The advocacy and the activism, if you will.
The misbehavior of companies with technology, the activism of the Vietnam War, and then people taking environmental issues to the court. So litigation, suing about endangered species. So it's all those coming together.
It's so polarized when you talk about the environment or sustainability. It's either liberal versus conservative, left versus right, environmentalists versus business interests. How can we bring folks together and collaborate?
What you said is exactly right, and at the same time it's also totally wrong. And I say that because of my old job at the Nature Conservancy. I used to, be asked to go to Texas and Utah and talk to climate deniers or just people like that. And in my conversations, everybody's an environmentalist. Do you think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to go spoil the world, I want to pollute the world, I want to destroy it? So we kind of created a story that has, generated exactly what you described, that it's Republican versus Democrat. We didn't need to. We didn't need to at all. And it's partly the fault of the environmental movement for being so quick to judge people as anti-environmentalists. Instead, maybe what you could do is start on finding common ground.
The issue is finding common ground because as much as we all care about the environment and we want a future for everyone, don't business interests, don't conservatives, doesn't corporate America have a right to say, maybe this isn't such a good thing, or we need coal, or we need the Keystone Pipeline, or we need desalination, turning ocean water into drinking water. Don't those folks have a right to their opinion as much as environmentalists do about sustaining the environment?
Well, first of all, any environmental decision is both science and a public policy and a political process. So certainly they have the right to their opinion. But I think we're kind of founded, and most countries are founded on the notion that there's a limits to rights. So there's a limit that if they pollute the environment in a way that hurts the health of people downstream in the river, they don't have that right. So, it's a well-established principle that the rights of business are not unlimited. They are bounded, and most businesses would agree that. Today, 19 out of 20 the leading business schools in the U.S. have corporate sustainability programs. Almost every company has sustainability reports. Sometimes they may be greenwashing, but just the fact they invest in making them gives you some sense of a change in values. I mean, corporations, in the climate policy, many of the private sectors ahead of the U.S. federal government right now.
Yeah, but let me jump in here for a second, because as an example, one industry is the oil industry. Those folks believe fracking and intense oil drilling is good for the nation. Environmentalists believe it's bad, harms the environment, does terribly catastrophic things potentially to us. How do you bring those two sides together?
The way I would start that conversation is I would admit to the values of those corporate leaders, and instead of immediately saying you don't care about the environment, I'd say you care about the environment. I know you care about the environment. I find out about some things they did about the environment. A lot of those companies invest a lot in cleaning up the water, the produced water from fracking. So they care about that technology. And then you would make the argument that, I understand your values, but I also understand the pressures you have to make money. And I'd sort of start the conversation in a less accusatory way. Do you agree in 100 years we have to be all fossil fuels? But if you ask that question, most of them would say yes. So then you start with that. Then you work backwards. You say, well, let's look at the science. Guess what? It's happening faster than anybody thought. These are actually the conversations I used to have with CEOs of companies. For sure, there are individuals who are bad actors as leaders of corporations. You're going to find that in any profession. If you try to find that common ground, both the common ground that we really do have to get off fossil fuels within 100 years, the common ground that you do care about the environment. I've had CEOs tell me I don't want my daughter to think I'm a bad guy.
Where do you find fault with environmentalists and their cause and advocacy, or do you?
There's a sort of a portfolio of diversity of environmentalists. You have, Greenpeace, who does these really clever things, that seriously are meant to embarrass. You have less theater, more social policy advocates who still might overstate things a little bit. The extremely ardent environmentalists might say the planet or species has rights. Okay? So think of it. So the planet and species has rights, human rights, and animal rights. Now I think every one of us agrees that that's true. That there's all three of those rights are valid, legitimate, ethical rights. We just weigh them differently.
You seem to have a very centrist, independent position where you see both sides. You see the great work environmentalists are doing, but you also appreciate the great work business interests are doing and how the two can morph together.
Part of that is I have a real appreciation of jobs.
Is there a way to have a clean, safe, healthy environment and also have a great amount of jobs?
Absolutely.
What do you see as some of the major environmental and sustainability issues of our day?
Any person who's an environmental scientist has to say that it's climate change. Climate change is an existential threat. Globally, if you disrupt climate systems enough that major weather patterns, major airstreams and ocean circulation, if you disrupt them that much, it's going to change the experience of nations in a way that the nations are going to be disrupted. We're not there yet, and I don't want to sound like a doom and gloom, but you have to accept that there is a finite probability that could happen, and that should give you pause.